The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous supporters. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/donate. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode number 94.
I'm a doctor. I've lived for over 2,000 years. I am Scottish. I can complain about things. Shush.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who, all of the deeper meanings and hidden layers. And today, finally, we're discussing the first episode of the 13th Doctor, titled The Woman Who Fell to Earth. And woohoo! Woohoo! Is how we cheer as Doctor Who fans. Joining me today on the panel,
some of us.
Folks, don't stop the podcast. Just keep listening. I'm sure it'll get better. I'm sure. Joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Hey, how's it going, Dom?
Excellent. And Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father.
How you doing, Dom?
Good. Okay, before we get started, folks, I want to just take a second to recommend something to you, a podcast to subscribe to. If you like this podcast, you're going to love Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. That's another podcast that Jimmy and I do. That's a podcast where we look at mysteries, supernatural and natural, anything that's strange, odd, makes you wonder, and we do it from the perspectives of both faith and reason. If you're old enough, you remember Leonard Nimoy's In Search Of, sort of like that. If you're a little younger, you remember, what was the show with...
Unsolved Mysteries.
Unsolved Mysteries with Stack. And I always forget that one because I missed that. Anyway, we recently, episodes we've discussed Bigfoot, Ghosts, Area 51, the Dead Sea Scrolls, Watergate, the Pyramids of Egypt, and more. It's been a blast. People are loving it. And if you haven't been listening yet, check it out. It's at sqpn.com/mysterious. This is a big hit podcast, and you want to listen because it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to make. It's a lot of fun to listen to.
Sounds great. I'll have to check it out.
I've been enjoying it. Matter of fact, the other day when I did my exercise, my jogging, I listened to the Dead Sea Scrolls episode, and that was great companion as I was running.
Awesome.
And even my wife listens to it, and she doesn't listen to any podcasts. So that's
wow.
She doesn't listen to my podcast, so she that's a good endorsement. So also, just again, before we get started, please remember to like Secrets of Doctor Who on Facebook. We have a great Facebook page there. Lots of great community and conversation. Please retweet the episodes on Twitter. Leave us comments. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, or your favorite podcast app. Or now you can listen to it on YouTube. We have it as a YouTube audio movie. And when you do subscribe on YouTube, hit the bell to get notifications. And then share this podcast with your friends. Hey, this new season is just starting. A lot of new people are going to be coming in to check out Doctor Who because of all the hype about it. And they're going to want to have a podcast where they hear some good discussion about what's going on and historically how it fits within the rest of Doctor Who. So please recommend the podcast. Help us grow our audience. That's how we grow, is by your recommendation. All the preliminaries are over. New Doctor Who. Loved it or hated it? Or somewhere in the middle. Jimmy, just your first impression.
I wouldn't say loved or hated, but I enjoyed it, basically. I thought that Jodie Whittaker was fine as the Doctor, the way she was portrayed in this episode. I had some concerns about the way she would be portrayed, but so far they're doing okay with her. I had some minor criticisms of the episode, but basically I enjoyed it. I thought we're off to a good start, and it had a number of good qualities.
Okay. Father Cory, your initial impression?
I'm pretty much to the same line. I very much enjoyed it for a first post-regeneration episode. We've reviewed a lot of them, and we've seen good ones and we've seen bad ones. I'd say this is probably one of the better post-regeneration episodes. I think it's a good, especially when they made their stated intent to be not really a soft reboot almost, a renewal of the series. I think they did a good job of that, and we'll talk some of that, but I think they did a good job of kind of bringing people back into the series again.
Yeah, you don't have to have a lot of knowledge about the series to get started in it. here. My impression is mostly favorable. All regeneration stories are rough. I mean, we've just got through in this podcast. We watched all of the regeneration stories and talked about them. And this is, it's a good one. The post regeneration story. At least she doesn't choke her companion like the Sixth Doctor did.
Right.
So that's a
Doesn't
bar.
try to kill anybody. So we're off to a good start.
That's right. I feel like Jodie Whittaker, she's feeling her way into who she is now, like as a Doctor. So the Doctor Regenerated is now kind of feeling her way into what it means to be the Doctor. She's certainly different. That she is a woman is integral to her, but it doesn't. They aren't making a big deal about it at the moment. Not like a big statement.
Well, they're really minimizing it. I mean, at first she doesn't even notice that she's a woman. She's forgotten that fact.
Right.
And then at the end, it's like, oh, I haven't bought women's clothes in ages. And
right.
So they really don't make a point of it other than that, which was good because, casting the first female Doctor after more than 50 years of this being an exclusively male part is something that raised a lot of questions about, are we going to get a lot of PC social justice warrior stuff in this now? Because Doctor Who has something of a reputation for kind of being infected with that kind of stuff and kind of preaching at the audience rather than just entertaining. And what there was a potential here of really going in that direction and making it I am woman Doctor, hear me roar, and alienating a bunch of the audience. And what they needed to do, and what I was afraid they wouldn't do, is have her be the new Patrick Troughton of she's just so likable that it's okay. We can get over, the previous trend, like when William Hartnell left the show as the very first Doctor and Patrick Troughton came in for this huge change in the show. This is, in terms of the Doctor's character, this is the biggest change since Patrick Troughton. Switching the gender entirely, and because that's going to affect a bunch of the dynamics on the show. And you need the first person in that role to just be super likable and super friendly, which is what Patrick Troughton did. And it enabled the show to have another 50 years of life. And it's also what Jodie Whittaker needs to do and just come across as fun, super likable, and let's have adventures now.
Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking about with her is that she feels a little bit, to me, in my limited experience compared to you guys with the classic Doctors, she has a feel sort of like Sylvester McCoy a little bit Patrick Troughton. There's some whimsy and joy, but not as much as, not over the top as whimsy like Matt Smith.
Right. Right.
She's a little more grounded and like a little bit closer to maybe how David Tennant portrayed it.
Well, I was just going to say, David Tennant.
That was one of the things I really noticed, especially at the very end where, it finally clicks who she is. That very much sounded like a Matt Smith thing, the way she expressed what happened. It's like, oh yes, the adrenaline and upset, outrage sound very Matt Smith, but not as manic.
Right.
Matt Smith could get extremely manic. I mean, that scene where he's hanging from the TARDIS as the TARDIS is burning and everything. I mean, that was who he was. He would get very manic, and she's got the joy. She's got the excitement, the energy.
She's not zany.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. She's also, unlike David Tennant, she's not angry, at least thus far.
Right.
And kind of going back to the whole issue of this change from a male dominated role to a female actor, I think if they keep this balance like they did in this episode, I think they're going to be perfect. And we pointed that out a couple of weeks ago, which we recorded a couple of months ago.
Right.
But I had to go back and listen to it. But we pointed out that don't deny it. Don't deny that this character is now female. But at the same time, don't slap us in the face with it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think they had the right balance where, again, you mentioned, Jimmy, where, the first time it's brought up, she's like, oh, I'm a woman. Does it suit me?
Yeah. That was funny.
Yeah.
And it's just like, Oh, that's right. I forgot,
half an hour ago.
Oh yeah. I remember half an hour ago, I was a white-haired Scotsman, and that's the right balance. I think that's the right balance. I didn't like that line about, it's been a while since I bought women's clothes. It's like, really? When? Why?
Well, okay, granddaughter Susan, for his wife, for his daughters.
Dads occasionally have to buy girls' clothes.
They have done that kind of that hint that maybe possibly the Doctor had been a woman once before in previous seasons, but they always kind of threw it out as a little teaser hint, but really never filled it out. And I was I'm kind of leery that they're going to try to keep going that way, because supposedly we know all the Doctor's regenerations.
Well, they've really nailed it down that we know all of the regenerations unless they do some real major retconning. So I think that's just kind of a wink to the audience. It's like, interpret this line however you want, but it is consistent with established canon.
Right. And I do agree with you. It could very well be, talking about, for Susan, or
just trying to be funny. Yeah.
I agree with you, Father. In terms of the Doctor, I think they've got the balance right. I think they need to do a little bit of tweaking with the companions, though.
I would agree with that as well.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the show itself then, and talk about the companions as we get into the show, because there's some things I want to kind of pull out from the story that I think will help us talk about the companions.
Yeah. By the way, before we do that, we should even mention the title, "The Woman Who Fell to Earth."
I was just about to actually bring that up. Right.
So obviously, she literally falls to Earth and crashes through the roof of a train and survives because she's regenerating, but they don't spell that out for us.
Right.
But the title is based on "The Man Who Fell to Earth," which was a 1963 science fiction novel by Walter Travis that's quite famous and got made into 2 movies, including one featuring David Bowie.
There's also another meaning, I guess a third meaning to "The Woman Who Fell to Earth," which is based on the opening sequence and the end. So just to kind of set the scene as you guys have seen it, we had no opening, no titles. It's BBC on the screen, then straight into a YouTube video of Ryan Sinclair, the first companion we're introduced to, talking about the greatest woman he's ever known. And we're led to believe it's the Doctor. But by the end of the episode, we realize he's talking about his Nan, his grandmother, who dies in the course of things. And I think that's the other meaning of "The Woman Who Fell to Earth," because, of course...
Oh, she also falls.
She falls. It's her fall from the crane that kills her. And so she falls to Earth. And I think it's saying, I think it's upending our expectations about what the show is going to be about, and it kind of upends that idea where we've talked about this before, where the Doctor bestride the galaxies, he's the greatest man who ever lived, and this whole ego boost of the Doctor. And I think it's kind of deflating it a little bit by saying, Maybe the people around the Doctor aren't going to say you're the greatest. They're going to have other people who are great to them.
And I that was something else I wanted to comment on. I really like the fact, and I have it in my notes for the episode, that the Doctor is no longer the strutting, arrogant person that the last 4 Doctors were. The Doctor is much more back in the mode of, I'm not too big for my britches, I'm just a traveler.
Right.
And that is so refreshing.
It was you can see kind of that contrast where, the companion Doctor and the companions are standing in front of the tentacle alien thingy, the
gathering
data device, device, as Tim Shaw is coming at them, and we're going to stop you. Well, I guess you can have it if you want.
Yeah, right.
She's getting kind of puffed up, and as soon as he takes a step, she pushes the companions back and lets him have it.
Yeah,
right.
But another related thing, since the show got revived in 2005, it's had this mythic feel to it that has introduced kind of an unrealism to the show. And that was there in the Russell T Davies era, where you had these, like you think about like the planets with the cat people and stuff, and these glorious New York and stuff. And it's all big and huge and kind of fantasy like. And then when Stephen Moffat became showrunner, it went even more in that direction and went science fairy tale, not just science fantasy, but science fairy tale, where like right from the 11th Hour with Amy Pond being introduced, you have this total fairy tale vibe. And that wasn't the classic series. The classic series was not like that. And this is much more the feeling of the classic series. You don't have the legendary fairy tale vibe. The Doctor is just a traveler, not this mythic figure.
Yeah.
It's more grounded. The science is more, I mean, it's still fiction, but it's more realistic than it was. Even the visual effects look more realistic than they did. They're not painting with these, pastel canvas special effects. Even, the crackling of the electricity and the coil and the darkness and everything, it feels much more realistic and much more grounded. And I really like that. That was one of my desideratum for this series.
Well, I know they changed they changed a lot of things, not just the actors and everything, but the visual effects that is being done by a different crew, a different company. How they film, I think in quotes, because I think it's all digital now. It's been for a while, but it's they're doing a very different tone, and it definitely has a different tone. At least this episode looks and feels different. It looks a lot more. Someone, I think it was on our Facebook page, commented it looked more like a gritty crime drama that you'll see from the BBC now. Right. Something like Broadchurch. Who was involved in that? Chris Chibnall.
All these Doctor Who people.
I was going to say it feels a lot more like the X-Files or Fringe did. So they both dealt with supernatural or extraterrestrial activities in science fiction, but they felt more grounded and grittier, and that's how this felt. From both the close-in shots where they had the talking, but even establishing shots where like the far-off pictures of of the van driving through Sheffield and other things like that, it felt much more grounded. And hey, let's give a shout out to some filming someplace other than Cardiff or London. Shout out to Sheffield, folks. It was nice to see. I got to say, the Peaks District looks beautiful. Say that right there. Looked like an amazing park, the national park they have there.
Yeah, the national park that's right outside of Sheffield there. Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the companions then as they get introduced. So Ryan gets introduced, and we have Ryan, who has a disease called dyspraxia, which is a coordination disorder, which is a real thing. And he's unable to. He's 19 years old, unable to ride a bicycle. And his grandmother, Grace, who he calls Nan, and his grandmother's husband, Graham, who he won't call granddad because he's her second husband, and he has a thing about it. And let's just put it out there: Grace is black, Graham is white, and so I think that's I think that's part of Ryan's issue, but it's never explicitly said.
I didn't take it that way.
Okay.
I just took it as he was attached in some way emotionally to his biological grandfather. And like a lot of kids, when a parent or grandparent remarries, they don't want to call the new person by a familial title like dad or granddad.
Okay. So there's definitely a contrast.
Sometimes it takes time. I mean, sometimes it takes time for that to develop. And I know, and there is that scene where Graham is obviously upset by it, but it's just I think we've all known people who their parents have, like one of their parents had died and the other parent remarries, and they have a really hard time having that relationship with the stepfather or the stepmother.
Well, and even if you get along fine, it's a different relationship. My mom died very unexpectedly, and I wanted my father to remarry. He ended up not doing so, but I wanted him to because I thought it would be good for him. But even if he had remarried, and even if he married a woman who I got along with totally well, I would hesitate to call her mom. You know, that's someone else to me. I might like her, but I might even come to love her, but she's just not mom. It's certainly not right off the bat.
So Ryan was one of the new companions. Graham is one of the companions. And so that's actually obviously going to be an issue between them going forward, especially given that Grace passes away at the end of this episode.
And there's some interesting drama that they could play there, because the doctor told Grace and Graham to stay out.
Yes.
And Graham did not stop her from staying out.
Right.
And Ryan may come to resent that at some point.
Now, some folks on our Facebook page, I'm going to actually read some of our feedback from our early feedback from our Facebook page at the end of this. But I want to mention one right here at this point where he said, I worry that the men around the doctor are weak. So Grace is strong. Yasmin is strong. We haven't talked about Yasmin yet. The doctor's strong. But Ryan, he's weak. He can't ride a bike. Graham lets Grace do the dangerous work. He climbs up the crane and stuff, and it doesn't hold her back from going in when she should have. In some ways, it's a lot like Rory and Amy in that sense, where Amy was so headstrong. Do you feel like the men are portrayed as being weak?
See, I noticed some of that, mostly with Graham. I noticed that mostly he was hesitant to really do anything at all. Yeah. I mean, really anything at all. About the only thing he volunteered to do was go talk to the bus drivers because that's what he was comfortable with. Ryan, I didn't see him as weak in the same way. And I didn't see him as a weak character, because he seemed more like an intellectual character, because he would make the comments. He asked questions. There was at one point where he asked, I can't remember exactly what the questions were, but the doctor meeting goes, those are great questions, and they were questions that advanced the plot line. Yeah. And that's kind of more what I see him, at least in this one, even if he does have the issue with his sense of balance, which, by the way, he overcame to climb the scaffolding to the
crane. And for people who may not be aware, dyspraxia is a real condition, and it's also untreatable. The best you can kind of do is manage it. And so it's a legitimate handicap. And I didn't view that. I mean, I understand how you could look at that and say it makes him weak, but I think you could also look at it and say, but he's triumphing over a handicap because he's refusing to give into it by the end. Exactly. He may start off weak, but he has this galvanizing experience with his grandmother, and that leads him to refuse to give in to it. So even though he continues to fail on the bicycle, he never gets it completely right. He's not giving up on that. And
by the way, I like that little bit at the end where you see him trying over and over again, and then they pull back and you see the doctor watching from afar, not interfering, not doing anything, but just sort of watching from afar. Sort of watching over him.
What I did think, though, was, and this is part of what I alluded to, is they need to do some adjusting with the companions. Graham, even though the actor who plays him is a comedian and is considered really good, from what I understand, and from what I saw of he did a video appearance at Comic-Con this year, which stole the show. It was awesome. It was really funny. But the way he's portrayed in this episode, he's not likable. I mean, he's okay, but he's not portrayed as likable the way the others are. In fact, like when he and Grace are on the train and she's being publicly affectionate with him, he's like resisting public show of affection. And it would have been so nice to have him reciprocate and have them be this cute couple and show them really enjoying each other's presence before all the drama starts.
Right.
See, and that's one thing I wonder, and I forgot to kind of mention this, is my thought was, what if Graham is going to have the most character development of the companions? Yeah. What if this was intentional decision on their part? I know this is speculation, but that they're going to write, they've written his characters so that Grace's death is going to impact him so profoundly that he's going to grow the strength. He's going to grow that personality that we really didn't see.
I suspect
not. I hope they will. I mean, I should say.
Yeah. I suspect you're right. And if so, it's going to be interesting to see how they play it out, because even if it's a second marriage and even if they only had 3 years together, your wife's death is going to hurt. Yeah. As someone who's been through that. Yeah. It's like, okay, I might have to be focusing on other things if I'm suddenly teleported to an alien world and am dying in outer space. But, oh yeah, spoiler warning. but I may have to focus on other things, but I'm going to be really hurting.
Right.
Especially if it was a woman like this who I met later in life, and she was my chemo nurse and literally gave me new life,
Right.
Through the chemotherapy. And then I marry her and I'm thinking we're going to have years together. I'm in remission. I'm going to go before she is. And then wham, he's going to have some serious healing to do.
I think you begin to see some of that character growth in his eulogy at the end as well. There's some of that.
I was just thinking that, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then let's talk about Yasmin. I really like Yasmin. I think one of the things Doctor Who has done in the past few years is have strong female companions, sometimes for good, sometimes for ill, according to some people, depending on who you talk to. I think Clara fans unite. I think Yasmin is actually, I like her. So she's a police officer. She's a probationary police officer. She's in her first 2 years. They're on probationary. She wants to do more than settle traffic disputes, because they're real cutthroat in Sheffield when it comes to parking situations. Let me tell you. That's almost as bad as Boston.
Notice, though, how she's displaying the characteristics of a good companion by I want to be challenged. I want something more than what I'm doing right now.
Right. And so she ends up with Ryan, who also shows the characteristics of a companion by touching things you're not supposed to touch.
Yeah.
With a big glowy circle
thing. I wrote down. I wrote this down as a note. Do not press floating yellow buttons.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love the bit where Ryan, and this is good on Ryan's part, where he takes ownership of okay, that was me, I screwed up.
Right.
And Graham and I think Grace are being a little, critical of him. I mean, who would do that? And the Doctor instantly raises her hand and says, I would have. It's like, yes, that's the Doctor.
That's the thing.
Right. So he shows her the weird Hershey kiss in the forest. I
thought of it as a gourd, big blue gourd.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it looked like, if you've ever remember the Nintendo game Dragon Warrior, it looked like the slimes from those.
I never played it, so I missed that.
You put some eyes on it, looked just like it.
So then we have the train. We alluded to that, the scary tentacle thing, because I mean, what goes to the root of our primal fears more than scary tentacles in the dark? I mean, that's such a great idea for a scary monster.
Scary electrical tentacles in the dark.
Exactly. And then, as you mentioned, the Doctor comes crashing through the roof. I like the fact that they don't spend any time explaining how the Doctor ended up in the train. We don't see the last 2 minutes of the regeneration. We don't see her falling out of the TARDIS. That's stuff that we've seen before in previous regenerations. This is, boom, we're supposed to remember what happened or not care.
And just in case you didn't remember that this was the new Doctor, they throw that little tiny snippet of the bass line from the theme.
Yes.
They threw that in.
There's the Doctor. Not enough to my taste. We'll maybe talk about the music a little later. But what we have here is, we've talked about this a lot, TARDIS separation. In fact, we don't see the TARDIS at all
doesn't exist in this episode.
No. I mean, we've thrown out everything from Doctor Who, and to start fresh with this. There are no Daleks, no Cybermen, although I thought at first that Tim Shaw was the Cyberman. There are no Daleks, no Cybermen, no TARDIS. But we don't even have a sonic screwdriver till the second half. This is starting from scratch.
And I had in my notes a couple of things. Not only do we have this long pre-Doctor sequence before the Doctor even shows up, but when and this is something I'm a little perplexed about, because Graham is of this, there's no such thing as aliens.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Since when has that been the case in the Whoniverse? I mean, that bridge got crossed back in 2005 at the latest.
Right.
Did he say no such thing as aliens, or no aliens in Sheffield?
They kind of said no aliens.
He says
I thought he said no aliens in Sheffield. But
that might have been Carl.
Yeah, that's later. The first thing he says is no such thing as aliens.
Oh, okay.
Right.
And so I'm like, are we back before 2005 when the aliens invaded London and it was undeniable to the whole world, or what? They do seem to be using older mobile phones, maybe. I don't know.
No, they're using a brand new Ryan's phone.
Ryan's is new. Yeah, Ryan's is new. So that's a little weird. But then what I noticed, like, as soon as Ryan finds the big blue thing in the forest, and he calls the police, they don't immediately go, oh, it's aliens. Let's call Unit or Torchwood.
Right.
And so that's part of the clean break that they're doing as a new jumping on point. They're not burdening us with having to learn about who Unit or Torchwood are. Later on, we have something similar where, where is it in my notes? I'll have to come back to it. But I noticed later on they had a similar thing where ordinarily up to now, they would have invoked another common bit of
the
Doctor
Shadow
Who
Proclamation.
lore. That was it. The Shadow Proclamation. When Tim Shaw says that this planet, is allowed. There's no mention of the Shadow Proclamation.
I noticed that.
There's also oddly no mention of 999. When they're on which is the British equivalent of 911. When they're on the train and the electrical scary tentacle thing shows up, why do Grace and Graham call Ryan instead of 999?
Yeah, what's Ryan going to do?
Isn't Ryan just going to call 999? You could have cut out that step.
Which is what Ryan did when he found the blue thing in the forest.
Exactly.
So one of the things that I noticed is, well, first, the Doctor, the 13th Doctor, has the regeneration banter down, like that regeneration madness. It's not over the top. It's in fact, some people have noted it's somewhat muted, which is fine. I think it's better to have a little muted because of so many other changes. Better to keep it kind of low key.
Yeah, they need to signal what her long-term personality is going to be like in this first episode because of the audience sensitivity to that issue.
Right.
She needs to hit the ground more or less who she's going to be and not have an episode of just being crazy.
Well, this is I saw a comparison, I think, again on our Facebook page to Pertwee's regeneration episode, where for the most part you saw Pertwee's personality fairly quickly. Now, the difference was Pertwee spent the first episode in bed looking for his shoes.
Going unconscious.
And then he took a shower and we got to see his snake tattoo from when he was in the Navy. We did that with Jodie Whittaker too. Yeah.
Yeah.
You saw her snake tattoo from when she was in the Navy.
Exactly. No. But that was one thing I did like about this, as far as that's concerned, is she wasn't out of commission half the episode like David Tennant was.
Right.
Yeah, she was like out of commission.
She had that little nap for, long enough for them to do their little separate things, and that was it. It wasn't this, she's constantly fainting and constantly sleeping, and, it was just a little short time.
Yeah.
And that was not right at the beginning even. She got up and it's like, I'm calling you Yaz because we were friends now. I love that line. That was great.
Exactly.
Well, and that was what that doctorless segment in the beginning was the equivalent of that regeneration separation of that. And we're over that. And now we're moving on. But I think they gave us a hint at the Doctor's personality that we're going to get, which is when she's at one point, she apologizes to everyone for what's happened to them. The Doctor never the 12th Doctor never apologized to anyone for anything. No. But, and Matt Smith, the 11th Doctor, was running around too crazy to apologize for stuff. I mean, it's just David Tennant, the 10th Doctor. Well, he I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry.
He overdid it. Yeah.
Yeah, he overdid it. But I think we're getting a little bit of the smaller, more restrained Doctor that we talked about, that we haven't seen in New Who.
It's like, again, we mentioned the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton, and also the fifth Doctor, Peter Davison, who was the other subdued human one.
Right. So we get to a point where we have the Doctor has to make her new Sonic, where the TARDIS doesn't just hand it to her like it has the past few Doctors. She has to now we know why we saw the advanced pictures from the set of. It looks kind of organic and sort of makeshift. In fact, it is.
Because it is.
She forges it out of spoons, and not just any spoons, Sheffield spoons, which are, by the way, famous for those of you who aren't up on your silverware. Sheffield spoons are known as, it's sort of like in America, we have Oneida, New York, which is known for its silverware. Well, in the UK, it's Sheffield. Yeah, the flatware. It's so Sheffield steel and Sheffield spoons are famous. So the Doctor's Sonic is made from such that, and a piece of Tim Shaw's transport pod.
Yeah, and that went by a little too fast. This was one of a couple of points in the episode where I thought they went just too fast and didn't explain enough what we were seeing visually. Because I didn't initially twig to the fact that she got this crystal. They showed her grabbing this crystal, but I didn't twig to the fact it's from the ship, from the space pod.
Yeah, and
I'm going, wait, where's she getting all this stuff? I mean, I can understand her forging some components based on 20th century technology, but no way you're building a whole Sonic out of that.
At least not something that small, that's for sure.
Right. Yeah. And I actually missed it the first time. I watched it twice because I watched half of it. Then my wife came home and I had to start again so that she could watch it with me. So I did see that part twice.
It's like a 2-second scene where you see her grab one of those crystals and then it flashes to her doing the whole thing with the blowtorch and all that.
I'm also wondering where she's downloading the operating systems from, both into Ryan's phone and into the Sonic. But we're back to science fantasy, and that's okay.
At least it doesn't dominate the way it was dominating in Moffat.
Right. She does say one thing that's interesting, and I think bears from an American point of view needs a little bit of explanation. She says she calls it a Sonic Swiss Army knife, but then she says
without the knife.
Yeah, she says that something that sounds strange to American ears. Only an idiot carries a knife, and I think what she's speaking to a specific British viewpoint. In the UK, they don't have a gun problem so much like we do in the US sometimes. They have a knife problem. There's a rash of knife attacks, and so people carrying knives is sort of debated. Like sometimes we debate people carrying guns here.
Which I'm like really I'm unsympathetic to. I mean, this is just me. But based on a variety of factors, I'm very unpersuaded by gun control arguments.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I am even more unpersuaded by knife control arguments.
Well, I'm along Jimmy's line. I can guarantee you, if you came through Malta, Montana, right now, you came through here and you interviewed 100 people. At least 75 of those people, 75%, if not more, have at least a basic folding pocket knife.
Yeah.
Some have Bowie knives. Some have,
Yeah.
I grew up carrying pocket knives.
Right.
Because most of the people in this area, they work with their hands and they're doing things like, say, cutting baling wire or baling string and things like that, where having a good pocket knife is essential.
Yeah.
So that one I heard right there, it's like, that's just, no, this is the one point where I kind of like, okay, this was PC. This was the PC comment for the episode.
Well, that's why I wanted to mention for an American audience, it sounds ridiculous, but from a British point of view, it connects with something that's contemporary in their public consciousness.
Yeah.
So,
and what you wouldn't have all those knife attack problems if people could carry guns.
Exactly. Because as Sean Connery tells us, only an idiot brings a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next thing is we have this alien race. So this is the at the heart of this is we have this alien race that comes to Earth, and as part of their leadership ritual, they dispatch a warrior to hunt a random chosen at random individual from Earth in Sheffield, apparently, because they've been there twice. I'm not sure why, but that's where they go.
Apparently other planets too, but they have been to Sheffield twice.
Yes, and it's reminiscent of the Predator, Arnold Schwarzenegger Predator. A little bit reminiscent of Star Trek Voyager's Hirogen. So this warrior hunter race. I mean, it's not the most original idea, but it's pretty original for Doctor Who. I like the fact that it's a small villain that presents a small problem to the Doctor, which is one person who's in danger, and people in collateral damage.
Yeah.
but in general, it's not about the planet or the galaxy or the universe.
Yeah, it's not like he planted a global thermonuclear bomb in the middle of Sheffield, and it's the entire world is going to turn into a big crater if they don't do what he wants.
Right.
And like in the 11th hour, we had the Atraxi threatening to kill everyone on Earth unless Prisoner Zero was caught.
Right.
Or, you have previous, because the first thing I thought when we saw these two alien things is exactly what the Doctor thought, which is two alien races at war using Earth as a battleground. We've seen that with like the Sontarans and the Rutans, and I thought, okay, well, that's plausible given what they've shown us. I like the fact that they subverted that expectation and showed us something different, and that it was much more small stakes. Those are good things to me.
And also another Jimmy Akin favorite, the really good body horror of the taking the tooth and implanting it in his face as a trophy.
That was freaky. That was wild.
I know Father Cory saw it this morning on Facebook. I put my son lost his tooth, one of his baby teeth. So I picked it up and I said, I have my Halloween costume, and I put it against my cheek and said, I'm Tim Shaw.
By the way, talking about PC stuff in this episode, there are a couple of remarkably non-PC things in it. One of them is, and they're both connected with our villain this time, because his actual name is, and this is confirmed if you watch it with the subtitles on, but his actual name is Tsim Shah. So TZIM-SHA, Tsim Shah.
Right.
And he's presenting himself as this big thing, tell your descendants that you once had the chance to meet Tsim Shah. And the Doctor can't quite hear him right and keeps calling him Tim Shaw, a human name.
Right.
And that's hilarious. But the thing is, if you think about it from a PC SJW perspective, it's like, you're other culturing this guy. You're mispronouncing his name and using an English language equivalent to his native precious name. And it's like, come on, everybody mishears names from other languages. It's not a big deal.
You look at IMDb, it's actually listed as Tim Shaw. English name.
The other thing, in addition to imposing, English culture on his name, she also calls him a big blue cheat, which means she's referring to two aspects of his physical character. He's big and blue. How dare you?
In fact, she calls him big fat fake, too. I mean, there's some body shaming going on there. Well, speaking of kind of making fun of his,
lost some of our audience. No,
well, speaking of the accents,
for the record, I have no problem if someone who speaks a different language doesn't hear Jimmy Akin correctly and calls me something similar to that. I also have no problem if someone refers to me as big and pink or big and hairy or whatever you want. Just don't call me a cheat.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I'm on the record as having trouble saying pronouncing people's names the way they wanted to, as with our good friend from Secrets of Movies and TV Shows, Thomas Sanjurjo. I have called him Thomas Sanjurjo, Sanjurjo, but it's Sanjurjo and I tried to get it right. So
I got one of those last names that people mispronounce all the time too. So I've been called Sticha and Sticha. So whatever.
I was going to say with Akin, I've heard all kinds of variants.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but speaking of accents, that's one thing that's actually come up is not only is Jodie Whittaker using her native Yorkshire accent, which is it's a northern accent close to Scotland, so it's a little tougher for American ears to get. But all of these characters, Ryan, Yasmin both have Sheffield, which is that area as well, that northern area accents. And Graham has a bit of Cockney thrown in there. And I've heard from that a number of Americans who had to turn on subtitles to understand some of what's going on in this episode.
I liked Donna Noble came out. Oi!
Yes. Yeah, that was great.
Dr. Keltai go, oi!
Oi!
Oh, yeah. Yes. Well, Ace would do oi, too.
Yep. Right.
Back in Classic Who. So
we got this interesting alien, Tim Shaw. I will say his name correctly now. And so he's hunting this poor guy, Carl, from the train, which we have this great moment where Carl is up in the cab of his crane, is starting his night job, his night shift. and he's got this audiobook, these of affirmations.
Affirmations. I love
valued.
that.
Somebody out there wants me. Yeah, no kidding.
Exactly.
I love the bit where, after he's been captured by Tim Shaw, and Tim Shaw is saying how unimportant he is. He's like, he comes back with one of the affirmations. Hey, I'm important.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
So, and then we also have this actually other moment in this crane yard where we have this really nice moment where we have this security guard who is unimportant to the story, really. I mean, he's just there. He's about to die. But we get this moment, this sweet moment where he's saying goodnight to his granddaughter via FaceTime or Skype. And
it really humanizes him. It gives him a great character moment. So we care about him when we then at the time we find out that he's been killed by Tim Shaw.
Right. It gives that moment some emotional resonance that we might not have gotten otherwise, which contrasts it to a drunk guy in the alley with the kebab and throwing his salad at him.
That was weird. I mean, I was watching that scene and it wasn't obvious to me that the guy was necessarily drunk, because I thought maybe there's some kind of alien influence going on here, the way they'd
staggering,
set it up at that
slurring.
point.
Yeah.
And I thought, is there some weird Sheffieldian salad throwing ritual? Or, I mean, if I met some big, huge, hulking biker dude in black leather at night and a big, menacing helmet on, I'm not going to throw pickles at him.
Right. It seemed a strange, sort of pointless interlude. It's just sort of wasted time. It didn't advance the plot any. We know that Tim Shaw is ruthless and a killer. And nothing ever happens as a result of it. It's just that was a weird misstep in this episode. I felt like.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it kind of felt like a filler scene that they decided for whatever reason they needed to keep in it.
They needed an extra 30 seconds to fill out the show at the end or something.
Yeah, because there was no mention of the actual nowhere. None of the companions, the doctor. You don't see the police talking about it. It was there and it was gone.
Yeah, it's completely irrelevant to the rest of the story, which is weird. So then the doctor, I like the moment where when they're in the crane yard and they're gonna take out Tim Shaw and save Carl, and and Yaz and Ryan, what are we doing? She says, "Don't worry, I got a plan." Well, I will have a plan by the time I get up there, which I feel like is the doctor in a nutshell. That I don't worry. Like several times we get this. Hey, I'm working on a plan. Just be quiet for 5 minutes while I figure it out. And that's sort of like the doctor on the off the cuff there.
Yep.
I did like how Ryan Googles how to operate a crane.
That was good.
It was, and it's actually a nice reference because it feels authentic to the audience that we're trying to get a younger, new audience interested in Doctor Who, and that would be authentic. Another authentic moment was, so the doctor is doing her talking down Tim Shaw, to get the standoff with him with the recall device. And
now, by the way, about that recall device, early on, before we even know what it is, but when Ryan at the beginning of the episode is in the forest and he touches the glowing yellow light button, we then see the red recall device in his hand, and we don't know what it is. And then later, the doctor says to Tim Shaw that she took it off of the pod that he was in. And it's like, wait, but we saw that thing in Ryan's hand. So it looks to me like there's some kind of editing glitch that happened where they changed some of the dialogue after they had this partly filmed.
Because she did point to it in the opened pod and say that's the recall device. That's how he gets home. There was a scene where she did that.
Are we sure? Yeah, so it was the scene where Ryan kind of reels back from the pod, and there's sort of a flare of light. Are we sure it wasn't his phone in his hand?
I thought it was the
See, I don't remember seeing the recall pod. I remember him pulling out his phone and calling 999, calling the cops.
Yeah. I have to watch it again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, another thing that happens here that is in character for the doctor is when, just as the doctor has sort of bested Tim Shaw, Carl kicks Simshaw off the crane, apparently to his death, except he activates the recall pod in time. But the Doctor gets mad at Carl. You didn't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's sort of a, you know, you didn't have to try to kill the guy. We were already winning.
Now, there's an annoyance in this scene. Sorry, go ahead, Jimmy.
Well, kind of we're winning. I mean, she makes this point that you're going to just keep doing this if I don't stop you, and to other people, and she doesn't stop them. And I'm wondering, okay, so that's kind of a major thing they've left hanging now. Are they going to come back to this race later in the season and she's going to stop them from this hunting ritual? Or is that just going to be dropped? Because by setting that as the goal, you guys are going to keep doing this if I don't stop you. You've just implicitly promised the audience that you're going to stop them.
Right.
That's true.
Now, there's an annoyance in this scene because she said, that he had his little neck button ready to go to release the DNA bombs, and he does it, and of course he starts melting down.
Right.
And she says, "Oh, I took them off and I put them back in the data device, the
tentacles.
I keep forgetting the tentacle thingy." And this is an annoyance that Doctor Who is bad about, but a lot of shows do, where they don't give you enough information during the episode to the big climax at the end of the episode. A good detective story, a good mystery gives you the hints during the story.
Right.
So as you're listening to the story, you're reading the story, you can solve the crime about the same time they do in the book. Doctor Who's horrible for this, where at no point does she say anything like, there, now I've removed the DNA bombs. They, got them out of there. I put them back in this device. Or, he'll have a nasty surprise if he tries to set them off. Something like that. Says nothing like that.
The bigger thing to me is they don't tell us that she's put them in the gathering coil. Right. I could accept they're holding back that she's removed them, because they've covered that before, that she needs to remove them. We don't know when they're going to go off. She says, just wait till I get my sonic built and so forth. And then I could understand it. Okay, the alien presses the button to detonate them, and whoops, they don't detonate. Guess what? I took them all out. What, do you think I'm stupid? That would be fine. But then using them, putting them into the gathering coil so that he can absorb them through total transference, which I thought was a bad line at the time that she uttered it, because they asked, what is he doing? Well, obviously he's uploading data from the gathering coil.
Right.
But you've used this total transference thing. You don't need that adjective there. That's just hyping the drama. And then it turns out it's not only hyping the drama as a clunky line, it's also masking the fact he's absorbing physical objects through this data transfer. That just makes no sense. So I thought that was flawed.
Well, and then that also then makes her anger at Carl for kicking him off the crane not make sense, because she planted the bomb in him. He's got a DNA bomb going off that's killing him. Why is she mad for him kicking him off? So, that is true. I mean, maybe we've missed something, but I don't know.
Well, and I think I don't think we have on this one. By the way, while we were talking, I looked up the image where Ryan is backing away, and based on previous and surrounding shots, it does look like it's his phone, but in the shot itself, where he's irradiated by the light from it, it looks like a red crystal. So I don't know what's going on there. It does look like weird. That, yeah.
So, let's get to the real emotional heart of the episode. And that's where we have a real death, real consequences for the characters. In fact, in this episode,
and not just the initial deaths of the random person who gets killed to illustrate the threat.
Right. Well, in fact, almost every death in this mattered. Each one had pathos. Even the train driver who died. I mean, there was she was killed by fright. I mean, it was fairly quick, but there was still a bit of pathos for her. The only one who really got left off of the pathos,
Salad Man,
was Salad Guy. Yeah. But when, with Grace dies, that is obviously going to be an emotional resonance that's going to carry through these companions into the future. And that is a big difference from especially the last few seasons of Stephen Moffat's reign. We're going to be comparing Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who to Chris Chibnall's Doctor Who for a while, so just you have to get used to that, folks. But Stephen Moffat didn't want to kill anybody.
Well, in fairness, I think Stephen Moffat would kill minor one-off characters to prove the threat. He would do that. What he didn't want to do was kill off anyone who was, part of the central cast.
Right.
And you could argue that Grace is kind of, she's functioning as a companion. She hasn't been established as a companion the way the others become.
Right.
But she's certainly on the edge of the central cast in a way the red shirts aren't. She's not a red shirt. Yes.
Right. In fact, if anything, she's much more central than Graham is at this point.
Yes.
So to look in retrospect on the episode, then, but what I want to say is I don't feel like any of the companions were flat. I felt like they were pretty well fleshed out. All of them, they all had character. There was all something interesting about each one of them. I felt like the Doctor's regeneration madness was more muted than we'd seen previously,
and needed to be.
Yep. I think
no lines about kidneys. No lines about not being a.
We got a tongue line.
Yeah,
the tongue. Well, she couldn't remember the word of it.
Yeah, and then she talked a little about things fizzing inside, as they regenerate, and she kind of described what regeneration is like. I thought that was kind of interesting. Just at the moment you think you're going to die, you're born. That's a kind of interesting explanation.
And also feeling torn between what you were and what you're becoming.
Yeah. That was an interesting explanation. Like I said, the stakes were small. That was good. It was a somewhat small story. We do know, we've been told, there will not be a season-long story arc. Each episode will be self-contained. There will be ongoing character development, but the plot itself will be contained to each story. And we will not have any of the familiar villains. No Master, no Daleks, no Cybermen. All new things. These are all things that we talked about in our advice for Chris Chibnall. So it sounds like he's taking our advice. We're also getting some different times. At one point, we got a hint that they're going to end up in 1950s America.
I'm worried about that one.
Yeah, that is a little worrying. They're going to hook up with Rosa Parks. At least it's different. It's a different setting. So we got that. We'll have to see how it comes off otherwise. Just a couple other things that I was mention is I wasn't excited about the soundtrack and the music. They have this new guy doing it, and his name's Akinola, and it feels like a couple times they started into the Doctor Who theme, and then it just abruptly stopped. Nothing. Segun Akinola is his name, and none of the music really excited me. So, any bits.
One thing I liked is we have the accidental companions again.
Yeah.
How many companions were the doctor awkwardly asking him out on a date to go travel with him?
Right.
Oh, you could maybe kind of come travel with me. Oh, no, these are companions that, because the doctor messed up on the transport device, ended up beaming them all into space instead of just him or her.
And without kidnapping this time.
Yeah, exactly. So these are accidental companions. That's a very classic Who thing. One thing, we had talked about in our advice to Chris Chibnall, and we've been upset about for a while, is the Doctor is my boyfriend / girlfriend. I honestly wonder if the love interest, the romantic interest, will be Ryan and Yaz. I wonder if they're going to develop kind of a relationship there.
Yeah.
So that's, and that would be interesting to see if that happens. I like the way they redid Peter Capaldi's outfit to not fit Jodie Whittaker.
Yeah.
Because there's I looked up their heights. Peter Capaldi is 6 foot tall. Jodie Whittaker is just under 5'6".
Yeah.
So there's a good 6 inches of difference. And you can see that. It looks like she's swimming in these clothes.
It could possibly have been the same costume. I mean, it was very...
Yeah, they just kind of tore it up a little bit. But it's...
Other than being torn up, it actually looks good on her.
Yeah. So, that was kind of interesting. And then one thing I just kind of noticed in the scene when they're in that car mechanic shop there where the transport pod had been taken, Yaz and Ryan are walking around. And I don't know if you noticed this, Dom, since I know you're a Mac fan, but there's a G3 iMac, a Blueberry one that was sitting up on the top of all the electronic stuff there.
Oh, I did miss it. I have to go back and check because I did
like
notice
right before they saw the newspaper clippings and everything.
Oh, okay. What I did see was I think his name was Asher. His really awful PC that was like his or his 2004 era Windows PC that he was left his "If I Die" video on. That's funny. I'm sorry that you saw it and I didn't. Now I feel bad.
So you have to go back and watch.
Yeah, now I have to go back and watch it. Any stuff that you want to mention, Jimmy?
Yeah, I liked how this was fast moving. It was faster moving than the 11th hour, and it was more coherent than Peter Capaldi's first episode. I think they did the Doctor's character well. I think they do need to tweak some with the companions. In terms of the preachiness quotient of this, there's a little bit of it. I can deal with a little bit of it. One thing that I was concerned about was, is there going to be a lot of sexism is bad preachiness? It's like, yes, we know sexism is bad. And there wasn't. I was pleased by that. The thing I'm a little more concerned about at this point, though, is, are we going to have to deal with a lot of racism is bad preachiness? Because we've got this Rosa Parks thing coming up, and just looking at the dynamics, and knowing that, it's hard not to say, okay, what are we seeing on screen? And even if you discount the fact that, of course, Ryan's family is going to be largely black except for Graham, the demographics that we're seeing in this episode do not look like the demographics of Sheffield. We're seeing way more multicultural, multiracial people. According to Wikipedia, Sheffield is 84% white. Right. And that's not what we're seeing here. And knowing the Rosa Parks thing is coming up, I totally agree. Racism is bad. Let's all be colorblind about it, including the show.
Right.
So it's just a concern I'm kind of, have that's still hanging out there. We'll see what they do. So far, I like this episode, except for minor things. One minor thing that I didn't mention is if Tim Shaw's skin is really so cold it will freeze a person to death on contact, his skin should have been like steaming in our atmosphere every time he uncovered it, and it wasn't. Also, and this is a bigger criticism, I mentioned earlier, I thought that some things went by too quickly, and they didn't explain enough. And one of the things they didn't explain enough is, what are Grace and Graham doing? It was not clear to me what exactly their plan was. We saw them running around, grabbing equipment and things. And it becomes clear that the gathering coil, and this kind of went by fast in a line of dialogue, the gathering coil is apparently trying to melt the crane tower or something to bring it down. Why, I am not sure. But then that's what they're trying to do, is stop the gathering coil by stunning it electrically. And I didn't know. I was asking myself, what are they trying to do here? Finally, when they do it, it becomes obvious. They want to stun the gathering coil so it can't melt the tower. But I thought this was not set up well. And consequently, Grace's sacrifice comes across to me cheapened, because it's not obvious to me why she's doing what she's doing. It's not like they're showing us the crane tower is starting to sway or bend because of what the gathering coil's doing. It looks kind of pointless. It looks like she could have stayed on the ground and everything would have been fine.
Well, there is a quick line where she says it's attacking the crane that Ryan and Yaz are on.
Yeah, but like I said, it goes by really fast in dialogue. Yeah. They needed to set it up more, and they needed to make the threat more credible, because it just looks like it's sparking up there. It doesn't look like it's doing anything to the structure.
Another another moment that sort of needed a little explanation is at the very beginning. Why are Graham and Grace leaving Ryan in the woods at night while they're taking the last train back to town from like, how's Ryan getting home? Because he can't ride his bike.
Yeah, that's true.
It was very like it's a loose end. It's a very bad plot.
You could say he lives right outside the park or something.
Yeah, except
so he doesn't.
Yeah, it
doesn't need to take a train.
Yeah, he lives in that attic that we had from the what was the
Love and Monsters?
Love and Monsters.
It looked like it. It looked like the same set.
Yeah. So I want to take a moment to kind of give some of early feedback that we got from listeners on our Facebook page, the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. It's been great. I asked folks to give their feedback last night. So Rick Angelini says, didn't love it, didn't hate it. It's a transition period where we're all going to need to settle in with the new characters. Okay. Marion Luther said she felt like it's more of a spin-off than Doctor Who. Not as good as Sarah Jane Adventures, but better than Class. It's fair. Okay. I mean, I think we all liked it a little better than that, but that's a fair assessment.
Digustibus non disputandum est.
Exactly. Don't let the vultures wear you down. No, there was something like that. Eric Naneman says, hard to express much of an opinion about Jodie's portrayal of the Doctor as it was pretty muted. He felt like it was muted. I really liked Yaz. We see that she's struggling to prove herself in a male-dominated police force, as well as the internal conflict as to whether she should follow procedure, knowing that they'll scoff at her for reporting an alien, or push deeper. I don't feel like it was about a male-dominated police force.
I didn't get that either. I thought the reason she's having to prove herself is because she's a new person. She's on probation. Yeah. It's not that she's a woman. She's just new to the force. She's not yet fully qualified.
Yeah, that's what I felt like too. Yeah. Fred Firestein says, I watched this afternoon. I'll rewatch it tonight. It reminded me of John Pertwee's first episode. We referred to that. No TARDIS, the regeneration confusion, and he had to adjust to a big change too because it was in color.
The whole world suddenly had color instead of just black and white. That'd be a big shock for anybody.
Right. Melanie, somebody or other, says, okay, my wife, she says, I felt like Jodie had done her homework and owned the Doctor. There was enough continuity to make her believably the same character, and yet so far I like how she's feeling into being her own sort of Doctor. Okay. We won't say anything bad about that comment because I want to sleep on my bed and not on the couch tonight.
Rob, that just means you don't get to say anything bad about it.
Yeah, if you guys want to say anything bad, I can always cut it out.
I have nothing bad to say. No.
So Rob Cox, he says, better than I expected. Glad this was a more intimate alien, not bent on destroying the universe. That somebody said.
Yes.
Brian Roberts says, I absolutely loved it, not just for the Doctor Who-ness of it, but living in Sheffield, it's rare to hear Sheffield accents on TV. I'll have to rewatch it again tomorrow, as while watching it tonight, me and my family spent most of the time shouting out locations we knew. Cool. Brian, I do the same thing with anything said in Boston. You know, it's just the thing. In terms of the character, I really hope they keep the "it'll be all right" winging it part of her Doctor. I like that part.
That's a plausible catchphrase for her.
Yeah,
that could work. It'll be all right.
Yep. And Phyllis Cowles, she also said didn't love it, didn't hate it. The final costume choice really does look very similar to the one Robin Williams wore in Mork for Mork, as Jimmy said in a previous podcast. Not a fan of the costume myself.
Yeah, me either.
No. And I think part of it is they want to make it look completely alien. I mean, just completely out there, that she has absolutely no clue what, human dress should look like. But
it also it avoids the problem of sexy Doctor. And I hate to bring that into it, but that whole the sex appeal of a female Doctor, it avoids that altogether, and it's just a woman in regular clothes. That's it.
Well, I wouldn't call those regular clothes.
right. But you're right. But not the sexy outfit.
They certainly have. I mean, Doctor wardrobes tend to be either conservative or zany in some way, and we just had more or less conservative, so this is zany.
Yeah, I mean, we had. So I mean, even Matt Smith with the bow tie and the suspenders was still pretty conservative. I mean, we really haven't had anything zany from any of the Doctors since Classic Who.
And we did get this scene of nope, not that one. That's not going to, or she's throwing about the out the dressing room there.
Right. So that's our early feedback. Of course, we love to get feedback from our listeners, which you can send to drwho@sqpn.com. You can send us email. You can send us an audio file. We'd love to play that. You can leave comments, like I said, at our Facebook page, Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or the sqpn.com page. Before I finish here, guys, any last comments, Jimmy? Anything left to say on this?
No, I enjoyed it, and I hope that they keep going and build from here.
Father Cory?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a very strong start, a very hopeful start for the new season. And if they avoid the pitfalls that we encourage them not to fall into, right. It could be one of the better seasons of New Who.
That's hopeful. As long as there are no dinosaurs on spaceships. So, so folks, like I said at the top, if you could share this podcast with others, other people who are Doctor Who fans or just getting into it, help us grow our audience, reach new people. I bet lots of people would be interested to have a good discussion about this as we begin a new season. You can find links to all of our personal social media and websites on our show notes on sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode in this season titled The Ghost Monument. And we'll find out whether they survive being in space. Hint, they do.
Yeah, that would be my guess. I also have a guess about what the Ghost Monument's going to turn out to be. This is just a guess, but maybe it's the TARDIS, because the TARDIS can vanish and reappear like a ghost.
Oh, and some primitive species will think of it as a ghost monument.
Maybe.
So until then, we can figure out whether Jimmy is right or not. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me in sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, all of this is new to you, and new can be scary.
When will I see you again?
Soon, I expect. Or later. One of those.